I had been looking forward to Stray for a very long time. I even began playing the game on the day of release, July 19th, 2022. My first playthrough was about 7 hours long. I played half the game on one day and the other half on the next day. And I just gotta tell you, the game ended up being a lot more than met the eye. You are not a cat girl. You're not wearing a cat suit. Nope, you're just a cat, a furry little quadruped, in a cyberpunk future. That was all I needed to hear in order to sell me on the game. Sometimes I'm nothing more than a simple girl who just really likes animals. So from the very beginning, I was hooked by the unique protagonist. An ordinary animal behaving like an ordinary animal as the main character is fairly common in movies and books, but I think it's pretty novel in a video game. So the sheer novelty of the game's premise is a captivating draw in and of itself, at least for me. The fact that Annapurna Interactive were willing to attach their name to the project was just icing on the cake. I believe that for a video game publisher, Annapurna have extremely good taste. Sayonara Wild Hearts, Abzu, Journey, and one of my personal favorites, The Pathless, among others. Their games have met critical acclaim and Dress Up Geek Out approval too. Overall, the cool premise and a video game publisher who I trust made this a compelling title for me even before I actually started playing it. And then I actually started playing it. Needless to say, massive spoilers ahead. So, on the most surface level, Stray tells the story about a cat who is accidentally separated from its family. While trying to hunt for food, the cat misses a step and falls down a nearly endless pit. The cat awakens inside what turns out to be an entire underground city populated by robots. The city, officially called Walled City 99, was designed as a safe shelter for humans from the dangers of the outside world. There is no sky, only a ceiling that is hermetically sealed. Today, though, humans are extinct, and the city, and especially its sewer system, is infested with these deadly biological anomalies called zerks, which are a mutation of a bacteria devised by humans. Humans wanted a convenient and expedient way to combat their out-of-control waste problem, so they gave Nico Corporation free rein to develop a trash-eating bacteria. But the bacteria also started eating everything else, too. The cat meets a friendly AI named B12 and gets involved with a subgroup of robots whose goal is to escape from the city and go outside. They call themselves the Outsiders. The cat and B12 navigate from the city slums through the sewers into Midtown, where they meet one of the core outsiders, Clementine, who has a plan to escape Midtown and go to the control room and open up the city seal. Unfortunately, her plan is thwarted by the cops, so the cat and B12 go to the control room alone. Overall, it's a long and arduous journey with lots of obstacles, but with the help of some friendly robots, the cat is able to return to the surface. Okay, everything I just said is factually true, but I would be massively lying by omission about what the story is really about, so let's try again. Stray is a story about a foreigner and a scientist who dismantle a system of oppression perpetuated by a hybrid corporate police state and free all of the people who are trapped within it. It's a game which empowers the player to experience for themselves how systemic change can be brought about because your differing yet empathetic worldview enables you to question all the arbitrary assumptions about how society ought to operate. We'll talk about that, I promise. But the important thing to note for now is the overall story of Stray is compelling because it is heavy, substantial, and relevant, while still allowing players to indulge in the initial light and fun appeal of, you get to be a cat. Speaking of which, you might already be familiar with the concept of Chekhov's gun. The idea that if you call attention to something in the story, then it has to have some necessity, some kind of significance, whether now or later. I claim that the gameplay controls in Stray follow that principle successfully. During the, shall we say, tutorial, the player is encouraged to scratch a tree. There are 0 consequences for scratching the tree or for not scratching the tree. The player isn't even forced to do it at all. Considering the lack of metrics in the game, there's no extra diegetic user interface, really. There's no health meter, there's no claw sharpness gauge. Scratching the tree at all is useless, right? Wrong. It starts out as a cat needing a scratch post, but this mechanic is used later for a myriad of purposes: to knock on doors, offer solutions to problems, open windows, and penetrate security systems. Scratching is essential to the plot. The act of scratching is, on one hand, merely a typical cat-like thing to do, but on the other hand, it's how the citizens are saved and the Zerks are destroyed, and that is why it's compelling. Another example, the first time you encounter the Nico box, you can hop into it. And that's it. It's just a cat in a box. It's funny. It's a relatable joke. But it turns out that the boxes fulfill a major role in the narrative too, with a range of significance. The cat is purposefully put into the box by Blazer to sneak into Nico Corporation. The cat cleverly exploits the box to sneak into the hat shop, and the cat is forced to use the box to hide from the Sentinels. Another example, the cat's extremely cat-like ability to knock things over. At first, it's just for fun, but later it's used to wake up a drunk person and also communicate how to break out of jail. Likewise, at first it's just a joke about a cat on a keyboard, but it actually is the way in which the cat frees B12, and also how they turn on the computers in the control room. Overall, the gameplay mechanics are frugal yet effective. And in fact, the cat's actions are extra effective because the cat is smart. The range of things that the cat can physically do is actually pretty limited, which makes sense, because they're literally a cat. But a fun narrative, nevertheless, still emerges. You see, the game offers a wide variety of challenges to the player. Tricky platforming, running from deadly Zerks, etc. For now, I want to focus specifically on the elaborate trade puzzles. The cat is forced to interact with lots of different people in order to, for instance, repair the broken tracker, or to obtain the disguise for Blazer. It's a narrative Rube Goldberg machine of sorts, and it reminds me very strongly of point-and-click adventure games of old, where the story can go in all sorts of zany directions, even though the player character doesn't physically do a wide variety of things. My claim is that Stray utilizes this element of gameplay in a way that is more compelling than most. And to illustrate this, I'll compare and contrast Stray with Escape from Monkey Island, LucasArts' adventure game from 2000. So, when Guybrush and Elaine arrive at the governor's mansion on Melee Island, TM, they are shocked to learn that the people think that the governor is dead. Well, she's not. The governor is Elaine.
It's the marriage that killed her, they say.
But I am the governor. Do I look dead to you?
Anyway, in the time that Guybrush and Elaine were away on their honeymoon, a catapult has been commissioned to destroy the mansion. So the main conflict in this part of the story is that the player character, Guybrush, must remove the catapult somehow. How does he do this? In grand LucasArts tradition, it's a narrative Rube Goldberg machine. Guybrush cajoles the dart players in the Scumbar to pop the birthday balloon of a drunken sailor so he can safely steal his kudu jerky pretzels, which he uses to distract the catapult operator so that he can fiddle with the catapult's calibration, which forces the next boulder to be flung at the cactus, which Guybrush had already equipped with a giant rubber tube, which he found separately at the docks, literally just lying around, creating a huge slingshot which forces the boulder to be flung right back at the catapult, which sends it off the cliff where it is finally destroyed.
Ha!
It is wildly imaginative and arguably not good game design, arguably. But the point is, all of this is achieved by the nearly useless idiot, Guybrush Threepwood, whose only actual game mechanics are talking to people, picking things up, putting them on other things, or putting them in his pocket. And so it is with Stray. Blazer needs a disguise to allow him and the cat to sneak into the Nico Corporation facility. How does the cat do this? The cat helps a group of friends destroy the security cameras that were newly installed in the apartment block where they live. In exchange, they give the cat their new mixtape, which the cat puts into a boombox at the clothes store, which distracts the proprietor, which allows the cat to steal a jacket undetected. Meanwhile, the cat goes into a bar and knocks a bunch of bottles over the head of a drunk employee to wake them up and force them to show up at work, so the cat follows them and sneaks into the hat shop by hopping into one of the delivery boxes, steals a helmet, and exits through a little hole in the wall. Seems similar, doesn't it? Guybrush can't just take the pretzels, or even just convince the guy to stop using the catapult. He has to ask someone else to make the pretzels takeable. The cat can't just take the cassette tape. They have to do something in order to earn it. I understand that Monkey Island is intended to be humorous, and it succeeds at that handily. My point is that it is so much more meaningful for the player to play as the cat rather than Guybrush, because the cat is competent. Guybrush is inept, but the cat is clever. Guybrush operates way below his capabilities.
Back then, the only thing duller than my sword was my wit.
But the cat operates at maximum catness. Guybrush is the worst of his kind, but the cat is the best of their kind. Monkey Island's use of the narrative Rube Goldberg machine can be frustrating. The solution to the catapult problem necessarily is roundabout and strange because Guybrush is incompetent and can only stumble his way into the solution for the sake of humor and zaniness. But Stray's use of the Rube Goldberg machine is compelling because the cat is operating at the maximum ability of a cat. Furthermore, the clues of the Nico Corporation disguise puzzle are introduced to the player before the actual puzzle is, which is a good design that sets up the player for success, unlike the hopelessly random and hopelessly arbitrary nature of Guybrush's catapult thing. Guybrush limits the player because most players are smarter than him, but the cat empowers the player because the cat is as smart or smarter than the player. The cat is the main character, but equally as important is the sidekick, B12. About halfway through the plot, B12 realizes that they aren't actually an AI designed to help the scientist. They are the scientist. They had previously uploaded their consciousness in order to outlive the catastrophe which resulted in the extinction of the human race. The cat is the one who revitalizes B12, and they instantly form a bond. They work together to reach the control room and open the city. B12's story and their relationship with the cat kinda reminds me of Case and Dixie from Neuromancer, the cyberpunk novel by William Gibson. Case is a human being and the main character of the story. Dixie is one of Case's accomplices, which he, meets along the way. In Neuromancer, Dixie is variously referred to as the Flatline on account of him being dead or not alive. Sometimes he's called the Construct because he is a ROM construct. Dixie used to be fully human, but his consciousness had been uploaded and saved to disk. Dixie, now being one with the Matrix, is made of code and proves to be a valuable ally in the various exploits that Case gets into. There is the obvious difference that B12 has a physical form, whereas Dixie is unphysical. He's effectively little more than a sophisticated computer program. Regardless, despite the similar vibes of these two duos, there are some critical differences, and I think Stray much better utilizes this fun arrangement. Let's take a look at some of the interactions between Case and Dixie in Neuromancer. I'm dead, Case. Got enough time in this Osaka to figure that one. How's it feel? It doesn't. Bother you? What bothers me is nothing does. How's that? Had me this buddy in the Russian camp, Siberia. His thumb was frostbit. Medics came by and they cut it off. Month later, he's tossing all night. Elroy, I said, what's eating ya? Goddamn thumb's itching, he says. So I told him, scratch it. McCoy, he says, it's the other goddamn thumb. When the construct laughed, it came through as something else. Not laughter, but a stab of cold down Case's spine. Do me a favor, boy. What's that, Dix? This scam of yours, when it's over, you erase this goddamn thing. Here's another one. Motive, the construct said. Real motive problem with an AI. Not human, see? Well, yeah, obviously. No, I mean, it's not human, and you can't get a handle on it. Me, I'm not human either, but I respond like one, see? Wait a second, Case said. Are you sentient or not? Well, it feels like I am, kid, but I'm really just a bunch of ROM. It's one of them philosophical questions, I guess. The ugly laughter sensation rattled down Case's spine. But I ain't likely to write you no poem if you follow me. Case doesn't have friends. He has associates. Molly, Armitage, the Finn, etc. To be fair, Case doesn't need friends because Neuromancer is hard-boiled fiction. It is noir, and a trope of the genre is a very stoic sort of masculinity, for some reason. But Case also can't be friends with Dixie, even if he wanted to, because Dixie epitomizes the notion of being impersonal. He lacks a physical form, and even when Case jacks into the Matrix to be on equal footing with him, Dixie actively foregrounds his own non-humanness, that ugly non-laughter of his. Contrast this against B12, who tries to embrace their humanity as much as they possibly can. Case doesn't really support Dixie, if you think about it. And why would he anyway? Dixie is so utterly inhuman that Case has no reason to treat him any differently than as a tool to hack into computer networks. It is true that Case and Dixie cooperate in order to successfully pull off heists and get into various shenanigans, but there is not a sense of camaraderie. Case and Dixie are compatriots, but they are not companions. If Dixie's presence of being like reading over your shoulder is unnerving, then B12's literal position of hovering over the cat is one of safety and reassurance. B12 on numerous occasions owes their life, for lack of a better word, to the cat, and the cat depends on B12 to translate the robot's language and to hack into places and more. Overall, the relationship between the cat and B12 reminds me fairly strongly of that between Case and Dixie, at least on the surface level. But I vastly prefer the characterization of the cat and B12 and the meaningful connections between them which cause them to support one another all the way to the very end. The cat and B12 are interdependent, but Case and his associates simply use Dixie. And that is why, despite their similar trappings of a sidekick whose consciousness was uploaded into a computer, Stray's treatment of what that means is so much more compelling. You've probably already noticed this by now, but one of the most visible and prevalent aspects of Stray's presentation is that the camera follows the cat, of course, resulting in a remarkably low camera angle that is not customary in video games. Buildings, furniture, and even people all seem giant. This is a big deal because in all visual media, camera angles convey a lot of information, a lot of meaning. It's a constant, unceasing reminder that this is the story of the cat, not of the people-sized or people-like robots. It's the cat. When I think of low angles being used prevalently, I think of the works of Japanese filmmaker Yasujiro Ozu. His films have been documented as being difficult to grasp for modern Western audiences because his positioning of the camera and his utilization of space isn't what Western audiences necessarily expect. Ozu's camera is frequently at the height of someone sitting on the floor, which is to say, a sort of Japanese way of sitting, to meet the eye line of his characters in a traditional domestic setting. It's a vivid illustration of how a simple cultural difference, how people sit, manifests as a different cinematic language. The point is, the decision to use a low camera angle in Stray is an audacious one because it risks being disorienting for players. I mean, it's certainly unique among video games, where we are used to over-the-shoulder shots or an overhead bird's eye view. In Stray, the camera angle is compelling because it operates on multiple levels. On one paw, it arises obviously from the fact that the player character is a cat, on all fours. Cats are low to the ground, therefore, the camera should naturally be too. On the other paw, it is a direct visual syntax to indicate that the cat sees things that no one else will ever see. Most of the time, the cat is low to the ground, unlike the robots, who stand on 2 feet and are, well, human-sized. But the cat is also able to reach extremely high and out-of-reach places too, like the antenna tower, and even the control room of the entire city. The cat is free to navigate these spaces, while the robot companions physically cannot, unless they want to risk getting eaten by Zurks, of course. When we consider that the cat is also a foreigner, a native of the outside, the cat's perspective is therefore not just a new point of view, it's a whole new world view. The cat doesn't simply see the world differently, the cat knows the world differently too. So you can see why it matters that it is the player character who embodies this perspective. That is the role which the player assumes. Stray is compelling because the player character equips the player with a unique worldview, one that shows a willingness and demonstrates the ability to save everyone in the city, because they can reach new heights that no one else can. It's a position of compassion and empathy, and a profoundly rewarding experience for the player. Stray puts on display a lot of cat-like behavior, scratching carpets, curling around people, knocking things over, ruining your typing on the computer keyboard, jumping into boxes. We talked all about that earlier. But there is one notable cat-like behavior that is conspicuously absent from the game. The cat is not a predator. The natural feline predatory instinct is simply not there. On one hand, there is the obvious surface-level explanation. There is nothing to prey on. There is no life to safely kill. There is no food for the cat to hunt. The Zurks are lethal, so they must be avoided or destroyed from afar. You can't pounce on them. And the Sentinels are also lethal because they shoot bullets. The closest the cat ever comes to violent behavior is with the Defluxer, which is the weapon that Doc built to combat the Zurks. But I argue that the Defluxer's extreme limitations don't actually make the cat a predator. Afterwards, I'll explain why the cat not being a predator is an important detail in the first place. So, first, the Defluxer overheats super quickly. Just like everything else in the game, this mechanic operates on multiple levels. On one hand, it has the practical effect of adding some challenge to the gameplay. The player is forced to be strategic about their shooting, rather than just spraying with machine gun fire. On the other hand, it is explained narratively that there's a lot of firepower in a small package, and therefore prone to breakage. Next, the Defluxer is not a general-purpose weapon. Doc designed it specifically to take out exactly one threat. It only works on the Zurks. And it only works on the small kind of Zurks, not the gigantic eldritch horror eyeball things. I don't have time to talk about the eldritch thing. Lastly, the Defluxer is super temporary. Despite being in the presence of Zurks from the beginning of the story, the player does not have the ability to fend them off until halfway through the game. But the Zurk infestation has grown so large that the weapon cannot destroy them all, not even a chance. In the sewers, B12 accidentally overworks the Defluxer beyond repair, and just like that, the player's only weapon is taken away for good. In summary, the defluxor's status as a weapon is so conditional, so compromised, and so fleeting that I don't think it can render the cat as a predator. The defluxor is not a weapon that can destroy all the Zerks, it merely gives the cat and B12 a fighting chance. Therefore, despite their temporary ability to kill some Zerks, the cat remains a non-predator. And besides, the real destroyer of the Zerks is sunlight, which is one of the least weapon-like things I can think of. Like, sunlight is a bringer of life, not death, you know? Furthermore, the player is not even obligated to use the defluxor at every opportunity, although I think the game would be borderline impossible without it. And arguably, it isn't even the cat who is using it anyway. It's more in B12's arsenal. After all, it is B12 who is exhausted from overusing it, not the cat. But backing up for a second, why does it matter that the cat is not a predator in the first place? Well, considering how normal it is for video games to be violent, we should be able to criticize why that is. Dan Olson with the Folding Ideas channel on YouTube made a great video about rethinking violence in video games. He explains that putting enemies in the path of a player is a cheap and easy way to add conflict in a game, but increasingly, players, critics, and developers alike are questioning the need for these violent excesses. Olson's video uses The Last of Us, BioShock Infinite, and Hotline Miami as examples of texts which encourage the player to reflect on the violence that the player character commits. I personally would have included Undertale in that discussion as well. There's a lot of commentary in there that is relevant here, but you can watch his video to learn more. The thing is, cats in real life are predators and, like, obligate carnivores, but in Stray, the cat is not an agent of destruction, nor even a sign of bad luck. Instead, the cat is a messenger of positive change. The cat's presence is an interruption of the lives of the robot companions, but it is not an unwelcome one. After proving to the Guardian of the Slums that they are not a threat, none of the robot companions fear the cat. Fundamentally, the cat, the player character, is disarming. The cat is magnanimous and non-threatening. Of all the ways in which the unexpected presence of a cat could be interpreted, the game nearly always decides to highlight the cat's capacity for cuddles and companionship. For example, this guy feels compelled to pet the cat even though he's never seen a cat before. Also, this guy sleeping in Midtown is shocked when the cat sleeps on his chest, but critically, he is not fearful and he does not shoo the cat away. He lets the cat sleep with him as long as the cat wants. Ultimately, the cat is a source of comfort and of relief. The cat is never a pest. It's true that the cat occasionally is a cause of mischief, for instance, interrupting the bucket tossing which causes the laundromat owner to get angry, or playing the loud music in the boombox at the clothes store. But ultimately, the story directs the cat to be a friend and to be a selfless helper, not a selfish predator, or even a nuisance. But there is another way in which the cat's non-violent nature is essential to Stray's thesis, shall we say. The cat has to be non-violent in order to demonstrate to players that the systemic change they want to bring to society, to open up the city, does not need to result in any bloodshed. The cat, B12, and the Outsiders are leading a revolution, but not a violent rebellion. This is probably a good time to pivot to Stray's politics. The only time the cat might be considered an active threat is from the perspective of Blazer, that is to say, the cops. The cat is dangerous only because the police views them as an accomplice of Clementine. The ethics of Blazer's sting operation aside, it is true that Clementine, the cat, and B12 are guilty of a conspiracy to commit grand larceny to steal the atomic battery from the Nico Corporation facility. But that's really just an excuse to lock up Clementine for the real reason why she's a wanted criminal in the first place. She has the audacity to go outside. Or rather, it's not just Clementine they want to detain. They want to contain the entire thesis of the Outsiders. The police want her in their custody because she is vocal about opening up the city. In other words, bringing systemic change to the lives of everyone. That, incidentally, would completely threaten the very need for Nico Corporation and the Sentinels at all. No matter how we put it, Clementine's threat is purely ideological. The Cat, B12, and the other Outsiders align themselves with that ideology. Clementine and the Outsiders, including the Cat, reject the authority of the Sentinels, and they reject the authority of Nico Corporation, which, by the way, are essentially the same entity because they collude with one another. Both the Nico facility and the actual prison employ the same Sentinels, and Blazer, who is an agent of the law, is in cahoots with the Nico Corporation in order to facilitate the operation which, for lack of a better term, entraps the Cat during the battery heist. Their combined presence makes Midtown and the entire city as a whole more unsafe for everyone, especially those living in the slums, despite the propaganda claiming that they live in the world's safest city. But there is no justice in the world of Stray. There is only incarceration. And the administration and enforcement of prisoners is completely automated by the Sentinels. There are no prison guards who are also people, so it's a thoroughly demoralizing experience that can't possibly guarantee positive outcomes. In fact, as best as I can tell, there are only two ways that the Cat, and I guess robots too, can even die. The only lethal things in the game are, one, the Zerks, which come from the mistakes of the Nico Corporation, and two, the Sentinels, which are an instrument of the police. So, the actual dangers in the world of Stray are corporate monopolies and the cops. I think that alone speaks volumes. It's a clear stance and an unambiguous commentary on the world that you and I live in. Stray is compelling because it is wholly relevant to the real world. It exists not just as a fun game on your computer, but also as a serious text with a clear message about distrust of corporations and distrust of the police. But wait a minute, think about it. After the abysmal failure of the Nico Corporation to deal with the waste problem, thus enabling the infestation of the lethal Zerks, why are they still in business? And after the humans went extinct, why does there continue to exist anything even remotely resembling a police institution at all? Here's the thing, though. There is no threat in the control room. There are no Zerks. There are no leftover humans that the companions didn't know about. There is nothing stopping Clementine from going through with her subway plan, except for the police. The citizens of Midtown could have organized to seize ownership of the subway and safely travel to the control room and open up the city for everyone, but the cops will not have it. It's not as if the Sentinels or the employees of Nico have been safekeeping the subway for themselves. On the contrary, the subway hasn't been utilized at all. But the Sentinels know that it is the gateway to the control room, which threatens their continued existence as institutions. Therefore, Nico Corporation and their cooperation with the Sentinels exist only to perpetuate themselves. It's all about subjugation and control. The truth is, the control room is utterly quarantined and wholly devoid of any kind of threat. Not even the service robots who mechanically trim the plants and wash the windows have gotten the idea yet to try opening the city door. They have continued to do exactly what they were programmed by humans to do, without question, despite the fact that humans have been extinct for a very long time. They don't notice when the Cat destroys the security system which guards the control room, and they do not intervene when B12's hacking of the control room computers results in a loud and obnoxious intruder alert. The utter lack of threats is an indication of how easy it would be if people in the slums in Midtown took collective action to open the city, and if the Sentinels didn't block access. And if everyone stopped unquestionably capitulating to the control room's humans-only requirement. In fact, I would argue that the humans-only deal is the perfect example of a rule that deserves to be broken. This security protocol was instated by humans who no longer exist, so why must the control room remain locked? Is it really worth it to keep this arbitrary promise to long-gone humans while the citizens of the city are ravaged by Zerks and wasting their lives in jail, families being separated, and everything? Stray encourages the player to reflect on these kinds of questions, which is pretty dang special if you ask me. There is another reason why it is compelling that the game's climax takes place in a non-threatening environment, and it's related to the narrative shift in focus. You would think that after enduring the eldritch horror festering in the sewers at the halfway point of the story, the stakes ought to be raised even higher towards the end of the story. But that isn't quite what happens. Indeed, my expectations were subverted when I discovered that the end of the game happens in the cleanest, most sanitized location in the entire game's world. In the control room, the threat isn't some scary monster. At this stage, the struggle is entirely within the cat, within B12. The looming possibility that the dynamic duo made it all this way, and then they accidentally jam the control systems, sealing everyone inside for good. It's resisting the temptation to stay forever in the blissful comfort of the control room, complete with the panoptic view of the city, utterly removed from the destruction going on underneath. It's actively restraining themselves from simply opening up a vent in the ceiling or whatever and selfishly escaping to the surface, since they're oh so close. There's also the threat that their unauthorized access to the city's seal might backfire on them, which is exactly what happens, because B12's hacking of the control room computers kills him. Poor B12, who has nothing to gain and everything to lose. Crucially, the final moments between the cat and B12 are in the most minimal dressing, which treats the situation with the sincerity and emotional intensity that it deserves. The ending of Stray is compelling because it boldly yet dexterously juxtaposes a quiet, meditative reflection of the journey against the life-changing future for everyone in the city. In conclusion, Stray is an extremely compelling video game because nearly all aspects of the game operate on multiple levels, which grants it a remarkable depth. It's substantial. The game's premise is novel and immediately appealing. The low camera angle represents not just a new point of view, but also a new world view. The simple and highly optimized game mechanics allow for, look at the cat doing cat things, but also critical plot points. The player character is competent and very smart, and also refreshingly selfless. The player character and their compatriots are outsiders, literally and figuratively, and this isn't a force which others them, rather it unites them, it's empowering. And it delivers a clear message about distrust in corporations and the police. The clear message indicates the game's development had very strong and well-articulated direction. It shows. The story of Stray takes on a very sociological tone. The real enemy isn't the right word. The root of all the problems isn't some singular human, it's humans. Humans destroying the environment. Humans putting too much faith into a corporation that made a bigger mess than what they started with. A corporation that does not own up to its mistakes and continues to exist, even though they make life a continuously living hell for the citizens of the slums. In some games, you can pet the cat. In Stray, you are the cat. But you are more than just a petable fuzzball roaming the streets, even though that is one of the very best perks of being a cat. Stray is a vivid illustration of walking a mile in someone else's paws, and a rare glimpse of what it might actually feel like to cooperatively and non-violently realize systemic change and improve everyone's lives.